All right. Well, first of all, thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Britannica for creating space like today to have conversations about something that is so important to all of us educators. I'm going to be kind of honest here. Um, when I was first approached to give this keynote talk today, I hesitated. I hesitated because it's not because I don't use artificial intelligence. I do. It's really just because, well, I'm not what you would call an enthusiast. I remember 2 years ago, I attended the IB conference in Daegu, South Korea, and Dr. Paul Kim, the chief technology officer from Stanford University, was the keynote speaker. And he was most certainly an AI enthusiast. The things he was talking about that he was implementing in his classroom in Stanford at the time were revolutionary and now are common practice. So I am not that enthusiast. However, I'm also not a Luddite, right? I do use these tools regularly. I tinker, I experiment, I learn. I've used the AI to comb through survey data. I've reworked classrooms by taking images of it and then asking it to reformat it, and quite successfully have led a launch to change our hallways as a result. I've also given workshops on how to use AI to offer more culturally sensitive communication in person, but also through email. So I definitely use it, and I guess you could say I'm an avid AI user, but I'm not an enthusiast. What I am enthusiastic about is technology generally. What I am enthusiastic about is learning, growth, and possibility. In fact, according to some of my colleagues, I might be annoyingly so. So I'm an optimist by default, sometimes to a fault. So that's when I settled on yes, I'll agree to offer this keynote because I think that people in this room are likely like me, um, maybe not enthusiasts yet, but still optimistic of the future and what AI can do for education. Before I move forward, though, the title of this presentation is kind of deceiving. I think that if anybody that tells you that they know exactly what works and what doesn't work in education, maybe they're sincere, maybe they genuinely believe what they're saying, but I can tell you that they do not know what they're saying with precise certainty. And that's because the landscape is still unfolding. There's too much to know. There's too many blind spots for anyone to come up here and tell you, here, though that checklist was really good. here here is a checklist that you should implement here in your class or your school. So this is where I want to start. I want to start with people. I want you to think about this. What makes you you? You're probably thinking something like, hey, my sense of humor, my interests, the way that I pursue them, the way I cultivate them, the social connections I've made, the ones that you've strained, the ones you've repaired, or the ones you've lost. The missteps you've made, the apologies you've offered, the trust you've rebuilt. And at the core of everything is those values, those beliefs that honestly took a lot of time for you to grow because you had to think about what was happening within you, your body, your emotions, your thoughts, but also what was happening to you. Political shifts, career changes, relationships, and technological advancements. The older we get, you see, the more agency we develop in the work of becoming ourselves. And I can't help shake the feeling that what's happening to us in no small way may be distracting us from that kind of thinking and may threaten to reduce our level of agency. So here's a question I want to hold on to for the rest of this presentation. These questions are not new, from Aristotle to Rumi, and the answers honestly haven't changed all that much. Think for yourself, in fact, what experiences in your own education most shaped who you are? Was it speed that created you or struggle? Was it convenience or was it challenge? Was it output or process? And yes, a lot has changed. And here's where I'm going to step back. And I'm going to offer you all a model that has helped me understand a little bit of what artificial intelligence has done for us, to us, and within us. And it all starts with this. Listen, we have sought out ways for things to do work for us since, gosh, I don't know. People say that's what makes us human, right? The advent of tools. And then from tools, we develop systems of tools, and we call those things machines. And the word we've had for work done by machines is this thing called automation. And the core idea is the execution without ongoing human intention. Automation answers the question, who or what is doing the work? It describes process, mechanism, execution, but it does not answer the question or describe judgment, purpose, or meaning. I mentioned the Luddites earlier, and through automation, through water and steam looms, spinning mules, stocking frames, they were replaced by automation, sometimes with great violence. Cigarette rolling. Hand-rolled cigarettes were replaced by rolling machines in the 19th century, turning cigarettes from this kind of craft thing that people would smoke in their homes to a mass commodity. Switchboards changed the nature of a gendered labor front and also the relationship of calling people from abroad. Typesetting. We've come a long way. I'm on my ink pad. And then, of course, we couldn't have had an industrial revolution without changes in agricultural harvesting. And when those processes were automated, humans largely gave up the work with their hands, most times reluctantly and often violently. Sometimes for the better of humanity, sometimes for the worse, but eventually we adapted. Now, for good or not, that's a tangential question and a tangential point. Eventually, though, we gave up some of our ability to govern that work. We gave up part of our autonomy. Autonomy's roots come from autonomia. The self and nomos means rule, so literally it means self-governance. It's the capacity to give yourself rules, to take responsibility for intention, judgment, and meaning. It answers the questions that are profound and yet simple. Who decides what matters, why it matters, and whether it's correct? We can automate tasks, we can automate tools, but we cannot automate who you become without sacrificing autonomy. So perhaps in the past there was a tension between automation and autonomy. But what's different now is that the machines, they're not just doing the work with their hands. The work that they're doing, it feels intuitive, responsive, creative, even relational. It's doing something that at least looks and sounds like thinking. So it's less this or that, and perhaps more this and that. And here's where the model emerges. Imagine this simple axis. Automation as the Y, autonomy as the X axis. You can see it going from low automation to high and low autonomy to high. This gives us maybe 4 quadrants to consider. At the high automation, low autonomy, you might outsource some of your thinking or delegate it. At the low autonomy and the low automation, you might just do some looking up, some retrieval. And then at the low autonomy, the low automation and the high autonomy, you've got something that looks like scaffolding or guided construction. And I know I'm about to say high automation, high autonomy, and high has this connotation of yes, it's the best, but I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that at this point, you might be working with AI, except it's not work anymore, it's thinking. And so it looks a little bit more like co-reasoning. So I'm going to break this down a little bit more as it applies to our work in schools. In the delegation piece, the cognitive work is transferred to the system. And this is where it becomes a crutch. This is where it's like writing a paper from start to finish, solving problems without understanding it. It's generating work that replaces thinking, and it's not just students. And then perhaps a little less risky is the retrieval. Information is accessed without transformation. We've been doing that back when Britannica was actually a book. It's when you're defining terms, retrieving factual information, clarifying surface level questions. It's useful, but it is actually limited. And this is the part that I think is the most interesting. It's when it's asking for hints rather than answers, generating practice problems, coding qualitative data. Students do this, writers do this, we do this type of work. It's kind of, you're starting to enter a part where maybe tutoring lives. And the part that gives me great pause, it's something that I've worked a lot with in AI, is thinking with it. And it's when human judgment is extended through a process of dialogue.
And it's where things get extremely interesting, but also dangerous. Their test idea is that we're finding arguments, they're generating alternatives, they're evaluating them. Just before, I'm actually not so sure. I want high schoolers in the code research project. I'll explain a little bit more of that in just a moment. But honestly, at a personal level, I'm not sure I believe it. Because it's actually quite easy. And I found this, and I'm sure you have with you work with AI. It's very easy to switch from the code reasoning all the way over to the delegation. The amount of text I offer AI, the amount of text it offers in return, has me question the amount of thinking I have and the type of thinking that it is doing and what is it doing it. Who's actually doing this type of work? And I'm 44 years old and we're working with 12, 18-year-olds. Speaking of 12, 18-year-olds, this model actually came from conversations with students. So it became clear to me as I returned from one of my conferences, and this has been said a couple of times, is that people are afraid of worms in a can. Cans being taken out of the worms out of the can. Right? Let me just tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the worms are out. And the worms have such a negative connotation. It's more like confetti. The confetti's everywhere, and it's messing around. It's actually kind of cool. So it's out there. And if it came clear that I really wanted to learn what it was, you'd be surprised what we'll get out of some of that lessons. When I spoke with students across grade levels, the dominant pattern was not shortcutting. It was more like tutoring. In math and science especially, students describe using AI to slow things down, asking questions step by step. In fact, they were using some GPTs that were created by the science and math teachers that were already designed using the curriculum of that class. What they did not use it for, so they were very selective, was they did not use it for history class because they said it gave way too much information And the teacher of that class was very particular in terms of what sources, what type of information he wanted to offer. In English class, they were using AI for feedback, but not for the final writing. They tell us that something. The students are already calibrated based off of the tasks and the disciplines that they're thinking and writing. So I mentioned how honest people were when I gave them pizza. Students were very honest. In fact, one kid to me said, "Oh, because you gave me pizza, mister, I'm telling you this." They said, yes, copy pasting does happen. But it happened before it. They said that it really only happens when they're under pressure and when the questions are so low level. And what also surprised me was their admission that they did not like to do it. They said, we're paying this school good tuition. This is a lot of money. I want to walk out of this school and be a successful person outside of it. On the social side, students name things we don't always hear about. They talk about using AI when stressed or when they were low. And in that same breath, they said, that's just sad. They understand the sycophantic nature of how ChatGPT offers its advice. They're not so naive as we make them out to be sometimes. Finally, they pointed us. They said, teachers' expectations are mixed. Some encouraging the average PTs, some banning it. Most don't even talk about it. That type of inconsistency leaves students guessing where the line actually is. So when I map this out, high autonomy looks like tutoring dialogue. High automation shows up under pressure and students ultimately walk backwards. But let me point this out to you, because I think we're in a room full of educators or at least former classroom teachers. How often did you get a piece of work from the students and ask before there was AI? I wonder if the
And if you read one of these two books, you should definitely read this Anxious Generation. I'm sure you've heard of it, and you've heard of some of the summaries behind it. Someone's mentioned some fact from it. Just dig in, listen to it, or read it on your own. The key point of the book is that the adolescent brain is growing tremendously, and these devices that we've put in their hands have really distorted their ability to grow and be the people that we want them to be. The dopamine systems in the adolescent brain are highly sensitive at this time and still calibrating. Social media offers rapid, unpredictable dopamine hits like likes and streaks and notifications, and the realities that they create, if you've read the headlines, from Gluck and its creation of nude profiles of women. You see the type of world that these students are imagining or not imagining, are imaging as reality. What I hope is that we can avoid this, and this is obviously a fake book. I'd like to avoid stolen process, a theft of our cognition, because we've been talking about attention and anxiety, but what about cognition itself? Everyone in this room is aware that the adolescent brain and its gray matter reaches its peak during this time. It deliberately overproduces neurons so that it can prune them. And as it prunes them, you use it or lose it. And if you're not using it, if you're not using those connections, if they're not repeated, then they're gone. So, what happens? Just a hypothetical question, because I don't know exactly. But what happens if critical reasoning, analytical thinking, and creativity are routinely delegated, automated? Does that stunt full development? All right, so that's a lot of doom and gloom. But I promised you all that I'm an optimist. um, Up to this point, I think in this conference, I've heard a lot of ideas about agency. It wasn't called agency necessarily. It's called like student engagement, perhaps. Um, let's break this down. Let's make this a little visible. We need to be able to, as educators and leaders, point to things that build agency, those that don't, and those that can, but it depends on their context. And what I think got lost in the AI was another phenomenon that was happening in the 2010s was a tremendous amount of research around the adolescent brain. And prior to AI, this was something that was about to reshape classroom instruction because for so long we understood the adolescent behavior as something of hormones. But it's not hormones, ladies and gentlemen. It's the brain developing. And there's a tremendous amount of research that points specifically to what works and what does not work in the classroom. And somehow we forgot to do that type of work. I'll point to just a few in this room because I think there are definitely educators that could benefit from reading some of these texts. Uncommon Sense Teaching, something that points out that learning requires effortful retrieval, not smooth, easy performance. It's when students struggle productively, when they revise, when they retrieve, when they interleave, when they reflect. That's when they're doing the cognitive work. From Teach Like a Champion, it's about who is thinking, how visible that thinking becomes. We heard earlier from Chris, do the cold call. Yes, do the cold call. Do the no opt out. Do right as right. Do wait time. Do all those different things because when thinking is optional, agency can be delegated. When thinking is public, agency is harder to fake. And if you haven't heard of Kagan cooperative learning strategies, that's something from 4 decades ago that needs to come back. It's not about the structures so much, though that they are important. The think, pair, share, the rally coach, the quiz trade. Those structures are sound, but it's the sequence that ultimately matters. Individual thinking, social sense making, and reflection and synthesis. The key here is just making students' thinking visible so that you can help them. That's obviously from Visible Thinking Routines, another excellent resource. And finally, if you haven't read enough of John Hattie's meta-analysis, note that none of those key points that show what influences have the greatest impact in classrooms, none of them are the internet. None of them are artificial intelligence. That doesn't mean that they can't be used, but it's not strictly what it is. In fact, John Hattie's point is this in Generative AI, its new chapter. Effectiveness is still measured by how well it makes student learning visible to the teacher and teacher impact visible to the student. So, as school leaders, this isn't a new issue. It's just repackaged, perhaps. I want to back up just a little bit. Uh, this past winter break, I was in Santiago, Chile, and my 8-year-old son asked me a great question, something I think we've all been asked, perhaps, maybe not by an 8-year-old. He said, Papa, what would you have been if you weren't an educator? Now, was impressed by my son. I can't take credit because apparently 80% of intelligence comes from the women. Hats off to you. The smartest thing I could have done maybe is just marry my wife. Um, and it's the first 8-year old I've ever had. It might be a common question of 8-year olds. But the question did take me aback. And after some thought, I have my answer. I think I'd like to be an urban planner because I think that they have the same kind of question. How do we design environments that help people thrive without controlling? I was in Santiago. I'll go back to Santiago in a little bit, but I found another city that's designed slightly different. Anyone recognize this? If you're spending time in South America, you might have, maybe Brazil. This is Brasilia. And look at the symmetry. Look at the coherence. It's so logical and impressive on paper from the top. But from the ground, movement is so prescribed. Human connection is disparate and separate. And when you juxtapose that with Copenhagen, which uses this 5-finger plan for urban planning, where people, where the city is designed for people to interact. And it's not that people go to places for social interaction, but that social interaction is actually the thread of what makes the city. Now, both of these cities are planned. Only one was designed for human behavior. And this is where the metaphor matters. Schools are designed systems too. Our governance as administrators sets the condition for voice and risk of students, but also of educators and families. The curriculum is the infrastructure of opportunity. If it allows thinking to be bypassed, cognition will never fully develop. Assessment signals what counts. When it rewards product over process, automation becomes, of course, the rational choice of our students. And student support services determine that type of access. If we build systems that circumvent executive functioning, then I'm not sure what prefrontal cortexes are going to look like in the next 10 to 20 years. Every decision we make either expands agency or funnels students into narrow spaces. So Santiago tells a quieter story. It wasn't designed all at once and not entirely from above. You can see definite structure as you look across the landscape. But you can also see that agency, or at least socioeconomic agency, is uneven. Clearly, the most wealthy parts are in the northeastern part, and on the eastern part, generally, it is more wealthy. And you can also see the city's attempt at a response with its metro lines, having the most dense amount of access being in that northeastern quadrant. The point here is that I think probably more of our schools, I can't speak for everyone, but at least for my sake, more like a Santiago than it is a Brasilia or even a Copenhagen. And that is that we have strong bones. We have a good foundation. Things happen to us, and we need to respond with different types of architecture. And that's ultimately the design challenge in front of all of us. So let me offer a little bit of a case study here and just share where we are right now as a community, because perhaps everyone's kind of talked to you about big picture things, and I just kind of want to be real with you. So this is not a model, but it's more of just a lived example. So when AI first started to begin getting traction around 2022, I had a lot more questions than I had answers. I still do, but I do have at least a few answers. Personally, I dove right in. Professionally, though, we did not rush in. We chose to wait and see. You see, one reason was external. We worked closely with the IB, and a lot of our externally assessed work, we needed to follow their line. We weren't going to frog jump their work. We needed to listen to see what external examiners had to say. And so we aligned with that. In that first year, though, we also engaged our students our faculty in developing a policy, kind of like what this at their university, at their school recently did. We formed a committee of diverse voices. We held teacher lunches, conversations, so that they could learn what they were doing in their classrooms. I mentioned earlier I had student lunch groups to see what kind of confetti already existed on the ground. We listened carefully to the IB guidance. We attended conferences, not to chase trends, but to compare our thinking. And oh my goodness, I hate this metaphor. We resisted building the airplane while it was flying. Please don't tell your faculty that you ever do that with any initiative, because no one builds an airplane while it's flying with any success. We built it while it was on the ground, and we're about ready for liftoff. Some of the things that I know we're going to do the next 4 months. We're at a crossroads, and we've already adopted certain strategies that I know we can leverage in our community. The first is to develop positive behavior system style language for what students can definitely do, and also clarity on what cannot be done, with the consequences and restorative processes in place to support them when they inevitably, because we do, make mistakes. The next piece, and I haven't seen this yet, but the adoption of clear standards that are developmentally appropriate. Um, Standards-based education really only came out in the 90s, and then gradually it started to take on the form of understanding what is developmentally appropriate. We're at this new space to know what AI type standards ultimately are and are not appropriate. And the first group that ultimately does that, I think, is going to be tremendously successful. Um, so Britannica, maybe that's your next thing. So that's my next 4 months. I definitely it's come up here a couple times, this idea of assessment, knowing how to be more creative around assessments. I mean, we might be assessing students' use of prompt, like submit your prompt, submit how you used it, reflect on it, and that itself could be an assessment. That's ultimately what I'll be doing the next 4 weeks. And the ultimate takeaway then, from what works and what doesn't, I would love to give you a checklist. I just want you to know that it's all so contextual. I do know this though. Treating uncertainty as an opportunity is definitely the right way. And as leadership, you should say that that's what it is. Because when you name it that way, you open up even more thinking around it. And you must act strategically, explaining clearly why you're doing something, decisively, actually say something and then do it, but also reflectively, using that design cycle to move forward, always with a finger on the pulse of those feedback loops that you get with the decisions that you make. And I alluded to this before, you need multiple voices in there. You should not from the top down build Brasilia. Think more of Copenhagen and get more people's voices in there, because I have blind spots. Everyone in this room has blind spots. And the truth is, the entire world has blind spots with artificial intelligence right now. The more you name it and the more people you have looking for them, the more likely you will find them. Certainly don't ignore the situation. Now is the time to really step up. No decision is a decision, so keep that in mind. And don't mandate a tool without any purpose. I see Britannica has some great tools moving forward, and as long as you can articulate clearly what that purpose is in your community, I think that it could have a very successful launch. As an educator, continue to explicitly teach thinking. Build that metacognition, because their brains are naturally going to move to that delegation quadrant. And remember, I talked about this, like had to take a step back. I didn't know how much thinking was mine. I had to. That's what we want our students to process and say. It's like, actually, I went this way, then I got this idea. It wasn't totally mine, but you know what? I went with it. But if they could say that, then they're thinking at that metacognitive level, and that's what we want: agency and autonomy. What doesn't work, and I think I need to be very clear on this, students, they want our guidance. They do not want to navigate this alone. This is happening to them. And if no one's going to help, if schools aren't going to help them, then I don't know who will. the internet is not inherently good. I think we've all learned that. And so artificial intelligence isn't. So we definitely need to put the right guardrails in place to support our students is clearly not understanding. As a parent, let me give you some advice. Just kidding. I'm still figuring that part out. All right. My last piece here is to remember that at the center of all of this is not AI. AI is not the story. People are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nathan. What an amazing session we just had. Um, I got some questions
Oh,
online,
certainly.
but before I start sharing some of the questions online, maybe some of you here in the room would like to ask some questions, or maybe for a change, I'll go with the online first. This one is talk. I think maybe it's referring to your slides when you talk about the core reasoning delegations. So the question is it possible to balance teacher and student-centered approaches with AI implementations, given that their pace of development differs, and also the concern about possibility of over dependence on AI.
Yeah. So the question is it possible? I'd say anything is possible. The truth is, though, that I in my community am not going to emphasize use of AI necessarily in classrooms as much as I plan to say, hey, let's do some think pair shares, let's get some paper out, let's like put our ideas together, let's agree on the ideas, let's have dialogue, hey, let's debate, let's do those types of things. um, I was sharing, I think it was with Ken earlier, um, back when I started teaching, which is going to date me. I already told my age. I'm 44. So 2007, I was one of the first teachers that put Google Classroom up. Right. It's like, all right, here we go. We had Google Docs, Google Classroom. And my classroom was one of the only classrooms that had it. That was great. Very innovative. 4 or 5 years later, you walk into every classroom and they've all got their laptops up and they're all on Google Classroom doing Google Docs. And that's not the type of education that I imagine for my own kids. I want them doing things, interacting with things. So, is it possible to find balance? Yes. I've got teachers that have found balance using Google Docs in their classroom, and I'm sure that they'll do the same thing with AI. But it as I alluded to earlier, that standards-based approach, some kind of other guidance that's clearly research aligned with what the adolescent brain can fully handle, um, needs to be put in place. Perhaps some of the guardrails, like what Britannica and some of the others are doing. Listen, it sounds like I'm plugging Britannica. I'm not. I was kind of impressed by what they demonstrated earlier. There was a second part to that question. Could you repeat it for me, please?
Um, it's the and also the concern of also the concern about possibility of over dependence on AI.
Yeah, that's a clear threat. That is actually my stolen focus book that I have not written, that I hope that no one ever has to write. Yeah, I believe that does happen. It already has happened. There's a couple students that has happened too. And here's the interesting thing: is that on the one hand, in my student lunches, a lot of them said we don't want to use AI because we think we can write better than AI. But then we found a couple of our students are cheating because they do put it into AI. They go, oh my gosh, AI sounds so much better. And then they lose that sense of competence and that confidence to be able to grow into who we really want them to be. So, yes, that is actually a real threat. And that's why I would lean towards not using AI as much as possible in that free form that exists. Perhaps in the tailored form, I think Ken's work with Top Schools AI has this idea of putting it in kind of guardrails around certain things and having it develop with the curriculum. I mentioned chat GPTs. I saw some heads nodding here, so maybe some of you already have GPTs for your math courses. Those have guardrails, and students can use them kind of as a substitute for just a basic tutor.
I love that actually. I think throughout the day, we have been hearing a lot of people who are actually championing AI. But I love that your session is actually making us grounded, giving us a balanced approach as well. So one more question over here. So actually, we got some questions around plagiarism. Um, and so maybe I'll just mention one of them. So how do you I mean, with AI exists right now, how what kind of guardrails or what kind of things that we can do to minimize the risk of plagiarism?
Okay, so I'm going to take an unconventional approach with this as well. Here's another risk of plagiarism that we don't talk about too much. It's the relationship that teachers have with their students. When teachers assume that students are plagiarizing because they're bad kids, such a terrible place. Um, these are just kids. And these kids, as I mentioned, they're just trying to learn and grow, and they actually want to be successful individuals in the world. But when we turn to them and say, these guys are cheaters, that's not true. They've got reasons. They might have lost their sense of confidence, their sense of competence. They might have been under the pressure because they had 5 deadlines on the same day. Maybe the prompts didn't make enough sense to them, and they didn't feel the agency and autonomy to go and ask you, the teacher, for help. I would start there. And then, of course, we've had plagiarism. How was there? Well, plagiarism, I want someone to look up the histrionics of plagiarism. Is that something that happened in 2022? People have copy pasted forever. Now, there are tools that trace it, and you can go back and look at it. But then there's another tool that students are using now. I hope there aren't any students online, but there's an app there that can repaste it in to a Google Doc, get it, and make it look like you are actually typing on it. I think Chris may have said this. Someone else might have said this as an example. No, it was the professor here. Um, just have a conversation with them. What do they actually know? Because it might be the case that they use Grammarly and kind of tailored what they said, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have not learned that content and cannot engage in intelligent dialogue with you about it.
Great. No more questions, but we got actually quite a lot of praises for your session. So thank you very much once again for Nathan. Maybe again, once again, I want to open up to the floor over here. Maybe you don't have questions, but maybe you will have some thoughts. Maybe you have some, you want to share your own opinions as well on some things. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for your very impressive presentations. So I am academic staff from IPST, and I've been doing AI in education as well. So but mainly I work for the Thai teachers and professional development for Thai because you're principal for international school, and as I know, you said Ruamrudee, right? Okay, so which is one of the big or well-known international school in Bangkok, in Thailand. So I just want to hear your opinions regarding using AI in your school. Maybe share some practical guide or what they are using in terms of the teachers as well as in terms of the kids themselves. So maybe whatever you can share, just at least briefly. Thank you.
Sure. I think one of the interview questions from the staff earlier asked me, how do you determine the difference between, what did you ask me again? It was like high impact tool and something that was maybe more superficial. And my answer was this. You don't just go to you don't go to Taiwatsadu and go look for tools and just pick the shiniest tool, right? You went to Taiwatsadu because you had some need, something you needed to serve the community with. So that's what you go to AI with or any tool. There might be a need in the community. Maybe it's releasing teachers from so much planning. Okay, well, let's find ways to do that. That could be done with AI. Or maybe the need is to help students plan. There are AI bots that help you with planning. What did we do specifically then in our school? We have not bought anything specific. Uh, there was originally a push for us to create AI leaders where we would buy licenses for ChatGPT for teachers to do this work and learn how to use it and do that. That actually sounded pretty good. The trick was that we also heard that Gemini was coming out and it was about to be free. So we decided to wait, and I'm glad we did because you've got Magic School, you've got Toddle with its AI, you've got all these other learning management systems with their different AI things. And ultimately, again, you don't go to Tai Watsadu and pick out a tool. You have a need and you seek out the right tool for that need. We haven't found a specific tool that meets that need. Again, I'm not trying to plug Britannica, but it does sound like it's pretty good in terms of offering those guardrails. I'm not sure. I hope that answers your question. I think it's all context specific, and that's why it's hard for me to answer specifically.
Yeah. Yes.
And also, what about the kids from your school then? I mean, how much do they use the AI themselves in school? Or, okay, of course, they use at home. We don't know that, right? But in school, do you have kind of guideline or specific tools that you provide to your school students to use? And what aspect are you using it for that?
Yeah,
Thank you.
uh, I have not delegated to my faculty that they must use AI. I have not delegated that they must use any specific type of AI. We have clearly articulated in our student handbook how they cannot use it for plagiarism. And our next step is to be clear about how they can use it in other ways. Something along that, what I call retrieval to the type of working with the person, the AI. But we're no place to start adopting AI tools. I would rather, again, adopt good instructional strategies. I think that somehow we leapfrog that. I know that you've walked into classrooms and you've also went, oh man, I really wish this instructional strategy was happening right now. Let's go back to that because I think that's what parents want to see happening in schools. They can do AI on their own. Okay, let me just offer this one last thing. Okay? To answer this question about AI, there was this great experiment around education. For the longest time, people thought, hey, you know what'd be great? Maybe kids don't need to go to school. Maybe they can all learn on their laptops at home. The pandemic forced us to do this experiment. And we hated it. Kids hated it. They lost the social emotional learning. Teachers hated it. They really wanted to interact with it. Parents, oh my gosh, they hated it. They had to become teachers. So technology is wonderful sometimes, and AI is good sometimes as well in education. I would focus more on how it can help teachers and how it can help students in this.
All right. Oh, one more. Sure.
Good afternoon, Mr. Meisner. So, as an international school educator, also, and using international curriculum, also, as a social studies, as we know, we're trying to develop a project-based learning process or authentic-based learning. As we know, we are using like the American Education Reaches Out or the CCS standards, where students use AI as a tool within a strict or a policy critical framework. I will give a scenario about this one that they will begin their own initial research or ideas, rigorously fact checking their answers and then AI assisted answers and focus their outputs or their process using the indicators that we are having. And through this, they will do culminating project. It's like authentic base where they will create their own design. Also, let's say creating a design. So this design will also debate the benefits and finally use generative AI to visualize the problem and how do they solve it. So the question in here is, do you think that building on this kind of model where students critical thinking drive process, and AI serves as a collaborative tool for analysis and visualization? Or do you think AI can be a credible tool not just for student work, but for helping educators assess the work against specific performance indicators like our curriculum, not just in the international school curriculum, but also for other schools also?
Thank you for that question. That sounds like an incredible project. First of all, your team has definitely thought through a number of different challenges and looked to interleave that type of work with AI. If the question is something like that a threat, like I've put forward? I don't see something like that as a threat. I think, though, you need to think very carefully about the type of guardrails you offer from that beginning creative part, because we've seen this happen a lot, where we ask the AI to give us 20 examples of something, and we've got 20 students, and they all come up with the same stuff because AI is the one doing the creativity. But you have to find the balance. And I have seen a couple of tools where they take a topic and it breaks it down to its corresponding topics, and then you can click on it and it goes to another topic, and then click on it, it goes to another and then they find something here and they explore that topic because they didn't even know that existed before. But that kind of scaffolding process, I think, would work towards the creativity piece. Um, and then I don't know how you work through the interaction between homework and schoolwork and where and how it's produced. But ultimately, look in this room. Like, what are we doing? We're talking and looking at one another and creating knowledge right here in this dialogue, right? That's the kind of environment that is actually the real world. So more of that kind of performative work in schools, changing that assessment is, I think, is the, good. So I think your team is on the right track. I would say it is. So well done.
Okay, so I think I have to. We are actually at time already. We still got two more questions online actually, but I think because we are already at time, we probably need to stop it here. But Nathan, thank you very much once again. That was a really, really great session. Really great slides as well. Thank you.